Welcome to PRception. I'm here today with Katya Rozenoer. She is the co-founder and CEO of Blastra. And I can't wait to have this conversation because Katya and I met on LinkedIn. And I think for me, it's pretty rare that I meet someone on LinkedIn and think instantly we're going to get on and we're going to have a really good conversation. And we've been following each other for a few months and seeing what each other's doing, working in the same space, but tackling a different problem. So Katya, welcome to PRception. It's really great to have you here today.
Thank you very much. I was watching your podcast actually before you invited me. Very nice.
Well, we're pretty new, so we've had a few guests on. I think you're maybe the fourth or fifth guest now, but it's good to have somebody who's really sort of working in the industry and tackling this from, we'll get on to talking about it, but I love how you talk about the sort of dirty work and there is an unglamorous side to GEO and this AI retrieval and perception that people aren't really talking about, and I think it's important to talk about it. But just before we get into it, could you just give us a bit of an intro into you, your history, and why you're here today?
Yeah, so my history as a person, I'm a former journalist who at some point transferred into marketing, and for the more than 10 years I've been in B2B tech marketing, working in companies of different sizes, from a small startup that eventually exited to a company that raised money and then went public, to another startup, and now my own startup, Blastra. My background is in narrative and journalism, and in content marketing, and in traditional B2B marketing, everything learned through education, but also through doing stuff. And at some point, I arrived at the idea of Blastra. This is my current startup, and the idea is very simple. So for me, as for a marketeer, one channel has always performed extremely well, and this channel was software directories. Think Capterra, G2, SourceForge, and other catalogs. The reason is because I've never had a large budget to manage, so I had to go in, and that was practically a free or almost free promotion, and I would be getting very high intent, high quality leads. But as the years went by, everything around me that served marketing improved in terms of how you manage things, everything except for the management of software directories. Each directory is a universal on its own, and the only way to manage several profiles is to have a spreadsheet and try to track which messaging went where, when, right? Which categories were under where. Not that anybody cared really, but because for me it was all of those were working channels, I tried to update once in a while. And then at some point I thought, okay, so I'm managing it, maybe other companies are managing it as well. I also saw how this was sold for small businesses, right? Small businesses used to and still have multiple what's called listings on sites like Google Maps and TripAdvisor and Yelp and Apple Maps, and all of them need to be up to date. That was triggered by the appearance of smartphones. So there was a company called Yext. They started a category of listings management for small businesses, and they went public. The valuation, I think, was $2 billion, something like that. There's a large company in Europe doing the same called Uber also. Basically, I was watching the same dynamic in the world of software products promotion and working through software directories. Just there was no solution for that other than my spreadsheet. So I thought, okay, so maybe there should be a solution. And as AI was developing, the bet that I made was, okay, so either those directories will become more important than they are now, or everything would just disappear altogether. It wasn't clear at the time. About a year ago, I started to think about it. And then by the end of last year, I started building. Again, still was no certainty if that would be important. But now it seems that no one is going anywhere. And if anything, directories are becoming more important. And we are that, centralized dashboard that allows to manage your presence, as a product, your presence on multiple software directories. Yeah.
Amazing. I love it. I think as well, when we chatted before the recording last week or a couple of weeks ago, and I think we both had a realization that with AI, was at a point where what we knew and what we were doing is actually going to become more valuable. And I'm really pleased to hear that that's your journey. But I guess I just want to start by saying that everyone that I'm seeing, and there's, we met on LinkedIn, right? There's a lot of noise on LinkedIn, and a lot of people selling GEO tools and, wanting to prove that they know how to get AI to say good things about them. And you say that's the wrong question because we can't change what AI thinks. So I guess it would be good to hear. So what do you think you can actually change? And why does nobody understand the difference in that yet?
I don't know, if nobody understands the difference. I believe that AI is a creature, almost a live creature, and it's more complex than it seems to be. And I think that in a sense, it behaves similar to public opinion. It's a reflection of public opinion because how AI works, it trains on all the available public data, and then it synthesizes multiple data points and points of views, and then it has something in its mind, and then a user asks a question, AI spits out what they have on their mind. They maybe add some information from the live search, but the process is not straightforward as in a human mind, right? You have an insight. It's not straightforward that I read this newspaper and I had this insight, right? The insight comes from what you've known already before and things heard before. At some point, they just converge and you have this insight. And also public opinion, right? There's this thing called public opinion. What does the majority of people think and how do they come to those opinions? And the work that needs to happen in order to influence this opinion is very deep. It's not that one post on Reddit can make it or break it in terms of public opinion. So that's how I see the AI. And I think a lot of what you call noise is just a lot of advice that's surface level, meaning that, okay, AI just quoted this listicle for your prompt. You need to get on this listicle. AI quoted that listicle. You need to be on that listicle. But think about how a human works. I don't know, when we write a thesis or when a journalist writes an editorial piece, we already have some opinion that we want to express. And when we work with sources, we look for sources, intentionally or not, that would support our opinion. So that listicle that AI quoted, it may not be the reason why AI has this opinion. It may be just, a supporting material that it serves to a user to show that its opinion is credible and it's up to date and it's reliable. Right? It does not necessarily the reason why and how the opinion was formed. So I believe that we need to work on a much deeper level under the surface. Not always this level is even seen, but if we do a proper work there, then everything else, then it will propagate up to the surface level as well eventually. And all those listicles would also quote you already because you'd be there in the source. And for me, this layer is one of those layers is the software directories, because these are highly reputable sources which you can actually impact. Another source is media, independent media or analytical pieces, which all may be impacted, just very hard to impact, much harder to buy, and you don't own those sources. So this is where the real work happens to me, and this is where AI feeds from.
And do you think, so just hearing you talk there about, so you're a journalist by trade, so you understand storytelling and you understand how a kind of perception is formed as a journalist. Are you saying you see the similarities between a human journalist and an AI and an LLM that is, can you give us a bit more insight into that?
Yeah, I'll tell you more. I had propaganda was an actual course that I studied, right? Propaganda is a science of how do we manipulate public opinion? How do we force a public to think what we want them to think? And recently I dug out a textbook for propaganda and I read it, and I think it's just a guide how to impact, how to influence AI's opinion thing. And those sources have to be perceived as independent, meaning like here's this, I don't know, Reddit thread independent, and here's this directory with user reviews independent. Here's this analyst piece independent. Here's this media coverage also independent. These are three sources of different nature. If they all say more or less the same thing in different words, I perceive it as a consistent, coherent story, which I tend to believe because I heard it from multiple sources, right? So that's one of the first first steps in order to really influence public opinion. And this is what propaganda teaches us. And it's not like the word has a negative connotation, but still, like that's the actual lesson written in a book.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because one of the things that I think about AI and LLMs, and particularly if you're thinking about a business, is I don't think businesses can particularly hide anymore, because I think what businesses have said maybe in marketing or in communications and the press doesn't really marry up with their operations. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but for me, this is a real big moment for companies to say, look, if you're not doing what you say you're doing, you're going to be in trouble and you're not going to win in the AI era. Do you agree with that?
If it's more difficult for companies to hide a poor product or service experience, is that what you're asking?
Exactly. Yeah. So their product marketing will say, I don't know, whatever it says, like, you're not meant to talk about yourself as the hero, but a lot of brands do. But they'll say, we've got the best, the market leading. And then you'll sort of delve a bit deeper, maybe into even the company culture could be a good example of this. Like, you might not think the two match, but actually they do. And they are going to be more important to be consistent across the whole operations of the company from an AI perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. On one hand, on the other hand, the state of AI at the moment is such that we actually can pollute Reddit with positive comments. We can buy place in a listicle, and we can in fact manipulate for some time at least those surface sources that would allow us to hide what's there on a deeper level. For example, almost every software company of a normal size that serves customers has a listing on Trustpilot. Most of those listings are of a very low rating. They say that they complain, right? Poor customer service and pricing issues and billing issues, and there are many complaints. Most of the companies do not address those listings, those reviews, because they think, okay, like Trustpilot is for consumers, it's not important for us, it's not about us, the identities are not verified, so, and it's not quoted by AI so much for our prompts, so we're not going to pay attention. But it sits there, and I think it's a time bomb for many software companies, because if AI for some reason thinks that Reddit is credible enough to be quoted and to take insights from about consumer like perception of your brand or the quality of an enterprise product, as checked by anonymous Reddit user, right? So at some point it will look at Trustpilot and understand, oh, it's a gold mine. It has all the complaints that this business is trying to hide. I'm going to expose them. And it does so for consumer brands a lot. And, I think it's just a matter of time when it will start doing so for B2B, for B2B brands. And by the way, I do know some companies that do excellent work on Trustpilot because they understand. But first of all, you know what? Because they care about their users. So I can give you example. There's Pipedrive, there is TeamViewer. These guys respond to every Pipedrive review, to every review. They don't care on which platform the review is. And the process is they address the review and then they pass it to the team responsible for that area of business, and they try to actually treat the cause. And Pipedrive is an excellent business, recommended by AI all the time, and so is TeamViewer, right? So they build this reputation, and they now see the results. The quoted source for Pipedrive may be Reddit or maybe something else, but underneath there lies a brand that really cares, and I see it from the work they do on every directory. So I think hiding wise, you still can hide for some time, but you are definitely exposed, and it's just a matter of time when it will start leaking. And when it will start leaking, it will start leaking in a very large amounts, right? Because like there are businesses that like have thousands of reviews on Trustpilot, never addressed, and reviews keep coming like every day that they keep coming. So it's like, I think it's an interesting moment, right? You're like, can hide and cannot hide. A user that digs deeper, of course, it's much simpler for them to see everything bad that's ever been said about this company with AI.
And you've actually just, as you were talking, upped something off. We recently saw that SEMrush was acquired by Adobe, right? And actually, I don't know if I should be saying brands that I've sort of seen and spotted, but I signed up for SEMrush and I tried to cancel, and their cancellation policy was pretty rubbish. And I think they took the money, and it took me quite a while to sort of get a refund. And having done some digging, I saw there's a lot of people reviewing this particular product to say the same thing, and that their customer service is awful. But I just think it's a really good example of a company that is walking the walk and not talking the talk. And it's such a crazy thing to think that they haven't got the right customer service when they're preaching that AI is going to be looking across all these different kind of forums and places and review sites, and they're not getting good reviews. So it's shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. That just came up as an example of like something I've actually seen practically in the last couple of months.
No, but I think it's first of all, it's hard to do for a big company, and they're quite big to like get to a level that service is excellent. You really have to make sure that each employee bears that in mind, that a user is the most important like asset for the firm. But I think also like that what's happening, people who are responsible for reviews and what's called customer marketing are not the same people who are responsible for customer service. And the level of communication internally that has to happen inside the company has to be very high in order for this process that I've described that's happening in Pipedrive, for example, right? When you channel the complaints to the responsible department, like it requires a discipline. It requires a process. When you have, especially when you have several channels, external channels from which reviews come, it's hard to aggregate them. But partially that's why I'm sitting here with Blastra, because like this is one of our ideas that we will also aggregate reviews at some point. Right now we are showing mainly the picture, the story you tell. We also we can show you the rating, we can show you the number of reviews, but like we also want to show you, okay, collectively, like these are the problems that your users agree on, and they do not necessarily complain to you directly. They go out and they're loud about them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested to see where it goes. Like, can you just give me an example? So you're working with a number of customers in this space to do the dirty work.
Yeah.
That they might not want to do, and it's time intensive and it's labor intensive, right? So I just want to see, like, from your experience, what is the level of understanding? They obviously understand, but like, what separates the businesses that really get it from the ones that you're probably having to do a bit of like education and persuasion to?
Yeah, so there are several levels of literacy when it comes to work with review sites. First of all, not everybody knows what is Capterra, G2, and Trust Radius, and you can have a career in tech marketing without hearing those names. Like I've seen that. I've seen that, and then you can be a founder, successful founder, and like you've never heard of those names. Happens, right? So like there's different levels of literacy, and we can start with it. Like there are people who are not aware. They heard something. Sometimes they come to us and they say, okay, just do something for us. Usually we'll just like list them on like a number of directories that fit, and we'll tell them, okay, get the reviews. Then there's some level of awareness, and they know they need to be doing something. They don't know where and what. I had a customer who was working with an agency, And the agency was literally submitting their profile to each possible directory, including Clutch, which is not a feed because it's a service directory. And then they were trying to get the company collect reviews under each listing, right? So there would be like one review on a list on a directory called alternative to. It's a wonderful directory, but just not a place where reviews are important. And this customer had a page G2 profile, and they were very close to hitting like 20 reviews on G2, but no one was looking at it. So I told them, okay, you know what? You have to stop review collection on other channels. Have to focus on G2. You have to make sure you have 20 reviews. You'll make it to the grid, and you need to try and become a category leader. That would elevate your visibility, right? And like we channeled there's like review a collection strategy towards G2. Now they're adding also SourceForge, which I think is a wonderful source for like LLMs to cite from and to learn from. So there is that, right? They know they're doing something. They know they need to be doing something, but just not sure what exactly. In that case, we help strategically as well. And then there are sophisticated customers who already work on the directories knowingly what they're doing. They understand the value, they're getting leads, they're doing maybe PPC on Capterra, they have a paid account with SourceForge and G2. They are seeing success. For them, the work is just to unload the manual tasks the number of manual tasks that they have, because driving reviews is one mission. And then there is you have to keep your profiles updated. What's happening now? Products are no longer shipped as waterfall, like in the quarterly cycles. We ship features every week. Major releases come every month. We update the messaging. We uplift we invest a lot into trying to communicate to our customers, hey, see, we have this new cool feature. Hey, listen, like we just improved the UI for you. We put it on a website. We put it on social. And then we have 10 profiles on directories which feed AI, and they show the product that we had half a year ago. Or that's the best case scenario, actually, right? Most often it's like a year ago, 2 years ago. And this profile gathers the review. So this profile signals the AI that the listing is up to date, supposedly, right? The product is alive. Someone is, someone is responsible for this listing. So the AI gathers, okay, that this is the product. This is the state of the product. And we try to help those companies by keeping their listings up to date. And by saying also the work is actually just to say, hey, why not to keep your listings up to date? We were talking about the necessity of conveying your story through a number of channels and like telling a consistent story. So if you can tell a consistent story across 12 channels that are all of high authority, why not to?
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what changes for a multi-product company once AI is reading? Because do you have to compose a story about every different product, or is it just a master brand? Like, how do companies approach that?
Yeah. So this is relatively new as an idea and as a concept. I gather it from like looking at how like directory profiles are organized and how things work. Basically, Adobe SEMrush released a report yesterday, like state of AI or like state of AI visibility. And then they talk about brand. How can a brand improve their AI visibility? And then they say, like on 2 pages, they say, okay, you need to have this citation reviews layer covered, and then they quote G2, Trust Radius, I don't remember what else, like some respectable directors. But then they say a brand, right? So they give an impression that your brand needs to be on G2. But how G2 and most other directories are organized, there is a profile for a brand. Brand means a company here. But under this profile, each product has an individual profile, right? Each product has its own description, has its own rating, has its own reviews, and it can sit in different categories. Same for Capterra, same for two other properties that are sisters to Capterra, same for SourceForge. So there is actually no brand for a SaaS company unless the brand equals the product. And what is happening is that every product either accumulates the signals that converge into its story around it, or it doesn't. And in the past, I think not AI, a user would search for some product. Adobe's website would pop up because it's it's a very high authority website stuffed with keywords. There are a lot of products from Adobe, so eventually a user would land on a website and find a product. Now the search begins in ChatGPT or in Gemini, and a user may not land on Adobe website. And AI, if it does not hear enough signals about this particular product of Adobe, may just not take it into consideration because it heard of Adobe, but it's not going to process now the entire catalog of Adobe, right? It looks into a category, and like if the product is there with enough signals, it takes it. If not, then not. So I think this is not the mistake. I think this is the thinking from the past that we talk about company and brand for software. I think for software we need to talk about products. And actually this makes sense, and directories who have been around for more than a decade, 2 decades, Capterra is around. But they figured it out that the fact that Adobe has an excellent Photoshop product does not mean that their other product is as excellent, right? So each product is a different story and is a different review. And your brand no longer saves you from one product having a poor experience. You cannot, as we talked about it, you cannot no longer really hide it or like just write the brand. So
yeah, I guess as well, it's still important to have that overarching brand narrative that all of the products sit underneath, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Like, if one product's surfacing and it doesn't marry the sort of overarching brand narrative that you've got maybe from a central perspective, then it's a bit odd as well. So I think that's for me, that's also really important to make sure that piece is right as well. But there's another, when we spoke before, you were talking about a company. They were big, they partnered with NVIDIA, and there was an example of where one older product took off organically and sold, but the newer products, which were generally good and they made sense, they just weren't clicking. And I guess this company's response was to fire the marketing team. But you have a different opinion of what they potentially should have done. Like, why do you think marketing's not the problem? And if you were in that situation, what would you have done?
Wow, good question. Look at your portfolio and decide from what you have, what are the products and what are the features of like your central platform, for example, right? So it's a decision, like strategic product decision. What are we promoting as a standalone product? What are we promoting as features inside of our rich platform? I don't know, like a good answer to that. I guess the clue could be like, who is the audience? If the audience is the buyer is the same, right? So maybe like all of these are features inside one platform. If you're talking to different buyers, then like makes sense to market something as a separate product. So my view is that if you have a separate product, if you decide it and like assuming it's a right decision, you have to invest into this product's story and you have to treat it as this minimal marketable unit and make sure the story is heard, the product is getting awards and it's getting attention and it's getting a separate media coverage and it's getting a separate analyst coverage and it's reflected on the directories as well. So it has to be seen as a product and treated as a product. I see a lot of mix up in the companies. So some, for example, would have several products on G2, but then you land on their website and then there's no section of products. That would be like a platform with multiple features, or there would be like solutions section, and like a product on G2 does not really have a separate pricing. It's just like a feature. Or the opposite, right? A company would have single listing on G2, but on a website there would be like multiple products, and some of those products would be mentioned as features in this G2 listings, and some not. And like this creates confusion now. A human would not care. Like in the past and now, a human does not really care. I don't care. Like you got product, you got feature, like I look there, I get you, more or less. AI thinks differently, right? It thinks structured, like it thinks labeled. If something is called a product, it's a product. If something is called a feature, it's a feature. Hard for
Yeah.
AI to get out of this box. So like, labels are very important. And I see like how there's a lot of blog and research now how category labels are actually important. So like those little things that never, who care like which category, what, but AI does care.
Yeah. It's bringing me on to something else. I thought about off tangent, and it's just a comment I'll make, but then we'll go back to the questions. I see similarities in neurodivergence, and particularly what you were saying there. It's like people who are on the autism spectrum, for example, they need to have the right words and the right categories. I do see a similarity between how neurodivergent brains process information versus how AI processes information. And I say this because I am neurodivergent, right? So I've seen some crazy similarities between how like the systems thinking, as you were saying, that it just really reinforced that point to me.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. No, like, yeah, I think it does make a lot of sense. So when a label does not really matter for a person who's like thinking, I don't know, regularly, it does matter a lot for a neurodivergent person, and it does matter a lot for AI. AI is guided by that label. It's a very interesting observation. And I think like, yeah, maybe as you can study a bit more of propaganda to influence, to understand how to influence AI, maybe you should study also a neurodivergent brain to understand better how AI thinks and why sometimes it arrives at conclusions that are not obvious to us. How did it get there?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about that. Obviously, it's a separate conversation, but it's something that I think is really useful to know, to sort of think about the similarities between a human brain and how AI works. Like that's really how I see it, and it helps me to understand it. And hopefully, as I go on and continue talking about the topic, like having the analogies that people understand, I think that's what's going to get them to really understand how it works. I guess one thing I'd love to know is, like, we've talked about the kind of the functions, the marketing function, and the different types of roles in the marketing function. You've got a product manager, you've got a customer marketing manager. Like, you've sort of described a function to me that doesn't really exist yet. For businesses who are watching this, maybe CMOs or business leaders who are looking to structure the team in the right way, how would you, in an ideal world, what is the structure of a team in the AI era?
Honestly, I have no idea. I don't think I'm competent to say or advise on that. I can try and verbalize what I think makes sense.
I guess maybe
See.
not the team. That might be a stretch too far. But like the ideal role, like, because I guess what I'm trying to get at is silos don't work. Like, we know that. We've always known that, but silos don't work, and even more so in this era. So like, what are the skills that, let's say it's one individual's job to do this right? Like, what are the skills that you think one person needs to be able to win?
I think like maybe there is a role for that. It just means something else, like a product owner. Like, first of all, the organization, like if it's software organization and sells like B2B software, so it has to have this like umbrella structure, in the sense like someone who's responsible for the brand narrative, and then how this narrative then goes down to each product narrative, right? So there's like this someone has to be responsible for the story of the brand, and it's more important than ever now, right? And then underneath, say, multiple products, and each product has to have this storyteller as well, or a product owner. Maybe it's the same person, but we can no longer create a situation when one person is responsible for review, another person for the product description, and a third person for the product quality. Doesn't work. There is no communication between the teams. There is not enough efforts. Like, we have to join the efforts, and we have to understand that, okay, like I'm carrying a full responsibility for this product. This means the story of the product, the customer experience of the product. How do we communicate with our customers inside the product and outside the product where they go to complain, and how do we close the loop and improve the product constantly. At some point there was popular this structure of squads. I'm not sure if it was like it became like very popular and like if it's stuck. Like, so usually a department is like, okay, we have product management department, and then we have marketing department, and then we have like other departments, right? So this does not allow, like, this is by function. The separation has to be more by product. Like, to me, it makes sense that this what would allow a team to express the, like, to show the product to the world fully, and to make sure that users that interact with this product have a good experience, and that the information about how good of experience they're having is going out and becomes public and feeds AI.
You do a lot of thought leadership on LinkedIn, and I follow your posts, and you're very active, and I always think what you say. What's the post that you've done, or like the topical theme that you've done, that's resonated with people the most? And is there anything that anyone's disagreed with as well?
Yeah, I think like one of the posts was like when I wrote about how I stopped thinking about AEO as a genre or like a subtask within SEO, and that got a lot of traction and responses. Basically, for some time, I think a lot of people, especially those with SEO background, they were saying, okay, so there is now AI. There was a Google, there was, I don't know, Bing, and now there is AI, another channel that we should optimize for. And then I understood that, I think like not just me, a lot of people arrived at the same conclusion that AI is not just a channel. AI is having opinions. Google search does not have opinions. It tries to algorithmically identify who is like the best source. But AI has an opinion, doesn't even give you the source. It just recommends you something, whether you asked about recommendation or opinion or not. It just expresses the opinion, which makes it something else, not just a channel. You have to be persuasive. You have to treat it as a neurodivergent person or as a public opinion, what have you. But you have to understand that it's a creature, and it's not a dummy creature. It may look dummy, but it's not. It has a very deep inner life, and it evolves, it changes. So that post, I don't remember like a lot of disagreement or on anything, because I guess I'm not writing enough controversial posts. There was some like I got some feedback about my propaganda article, mainly from the people with the same background as myself, who grew up in the post-Soviet Union territory, who are traumatized by this, as myself, by the way. But this is something I think I'll be getting back to that a lot. And I think that this is a bit of a controversial thought, that like, okay, we can learn from propaganda. We can.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think that's definitely the journalist in you, right? You said you don't have much controversial content. I don't think you have, from what I've seen, and I think it's been, it's very educational. It's very good. I think it'd be great to see you lean into some of that more controversial thinking, like a thesis, as like we were saying before. Like, my kind of thinking is around the neurodivergent piece, but actually your thinking is around more of the propaganda. I think it's going to be really interesting to see people who have got their own forming their own opinions on things that they've known, or their personal experiences. Clearly, you've just said it's very personal to you as well, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of other people who have come up to their own conclusion about what it is. And I think we should all be doing that, because I think it's really useful to learn something else as well, that I mean, I wouldn't have thought about it in that way of propaganda, but actually now you've said it, it's actually given me something else to take away and learn and think, okay, that's really useful from a strategy perspective, but also just as a general understanding perspective. So I know it's uncomfortable though, isn't it, when we put ourselves out there for things that people might not agree with, but I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, no, and I think I got a gift from you today with this neurodivergence idea, because it didn't come to me. There's a lot of talk now about like non-commodity content, and like how in order to appear in AI you have to create this non-commodity content, and like these are good examples of like those things that AI cannot come up with unless prompted, right? As like you say you are neurodivergent, so like that's natural for you to think about, oh, okay, that's very similar to how I experience the world, and like only you can come up with such an idea, and then like you can develop it. And same maybe like for me, like with propaganda, because I had this class, like I literally was sitting half a year in the class studying how propaganda works, and then like I went to work and I thought like propaganda was not existent anymore, but like turned out it did, right? So like you have to live this experience in order to be able to understand like, wow, like what I'm looking at now is very similar with what I've experienced then. And then when you combine those things, it becomes very interesting. The thing is, like, AI also trains us not to think, right? You don't want to
Oh
think.
yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
take what AI spits out and then like, copy paste it and move
But
on.
it's only as good as what you get. Like, I personally, as a human being, need a lot of context. My boyfriend hates it. He's like, I just don't need the, like, your whole backstory. But I give my whole backstory to AI and it gives me much better results. So it's like, you need context, a lot of context, and you get better results from it. And then you sort of reshape it and whatever. And, you know, nothing that is posted really comes out as AI has written it verbatim. One more question before I let you go. And it's, you know, the idea of this podcast was set up to think about how in this AI era, brands are generating perception, or how they are managing perception. And I guess you are sitting right in the source of something that AI trusts. You're watching which companies get recommended, which companies get skipped. So when we're thinking about it in this way, like when a buyer first learns about a company that was written in a place that a company doesn't even know exists, or like completely forgotten exists, how do you think that is going to shape how markets decide who wins, which business wins in this new world?
I have no idea. I think it's a very difficult question. But basically, what I see happening is companies are not aware when they are like losing mention. So there are AO tracking systems which allow you to track the prompts that are important for you. But a lot of those prompts, like I try them all the time, a lot of those prompts are synthetically generated. And you may not really know which prompts would lead to your business and don't, because you're not tracking. We don't know, like we have like blind spots, and AI tracking still leaves us with a lot of blind spots. I think I have the answer to your question. So as with a person, everybody has blind spots, and there are blind spots that we're aware that we have blind spots, and then we can look for them, and then that would be an opportunity to improve. At some point, it becomes like not a blind spot, and then there are blind spots that we're not aware that we have a blind spot. And I think a lot of companies are there, right? They track AI visibility, they track prompts that they set or AI set for them, and they didn't check because it's a lot of prompts, and they think they're in control, but they have blind spots that they're not even aware they're blind spots. And I think the brands who are aware that have blind spots, and the brands who are actively looking for something they don't know, for something they didn't check, for something they're not tracking, would win, because everybody else is tracking pretty much the same thing and pretty much the same prompts, like unique to their business, but I think not quite.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think the key takeaway for me is if you're a brand watching, you need to not skip the review sites. That is a big trusted source, and Katya and Blastra can help you if you do want to get involved with that. So, Katya, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.